Hello, everyone, and welcome to this now on the very important topic of data privacy and ethical challenges in RWE. Hi, I'm Pooja Banerjee, and I am heading the medical communications at Krystelis. With over 18 years of experience in diverse fields ranging from academic, research, strategic communications, public health. I think I found my niche in medical communications. And real world evidence is a very important key critical aspects of medical communications. So I will take you through a few slides to set the context before I open the stage for our discussion with our very esteemed guests that we have today with us. I hope my screen is visible. So, today we're going to talk about real world evidence and the most important aspect of real world evidence, that is the data and privacy challenges. On my screen, you see some very important real world evidence studies that have been conducted in India. And one of them, landmark trial, is the first prospective multi center longitudinal study, and it covered about 6,300 patients and spread over 450 centers. And this also illustrates the importance of real world data when we talk about regulatory approvals in today's healthcare. Because even if a drug is successful in a clinical trial and approved by regulators, it is very difficult to guarantee that it is safe and effective on each individual patient. So, for decades, we have been relying on stringent clinical trial data, and it has not only amounted to great expenditures for pharmaceutical industry, but also has may not have resulted in very good patient outcomes because it is still questionable whether the results are generalizable to a larger data set or not. So, real world evidence and real world insights from the real world data is extremely important in modern healthcare. However, this is also affected by two very important challenges or concerns. The very first of them is challenges that are related to data privacy. So there are various ways, and in the previous slide, you can see that there are various ways, sources from where we collect data when we are conducting a real world evidence. These range from electronic health records to disease registries to patient registries to claims data to wearable device data, health survey data, consumer data. Now, with all this data and the technological advancement that we have today, plus the accessibility of AI in all aspects of our lives, is the data that we have collected, is it robust? Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it ethically collected? Has it been ensured that the patient privacy was maintained while the data was collected? And since this data is heterogeneous in nature, it has been collected from various sources, various disparate sources. Can this be seamlessly integrated so that it is clinically utilizable? Can it be adapted into clinical practice? Can we ensure that this data is adaptable and scalable to a larger population? Because, for example, if we are collecting data from wearable devices, then are we not restricting ourselves to collecting data from a particular section of the society which can afford those devices? Is the data secure? Can it be breached? Can it be tampered to get unwanted results from it? Has the confidentiality been ensured? The integrity of data, the legibility of data. Was the patient informed that his data might be collected and used for research purposes later on? So, these are some of the very important data privacy challenges that affect a real world evidence study and the data analysis and eventually the real world insights that we gain from it. And the second concern, is ethical challenges, and one of the most important challenges, informed consent nuances. How do we take consent from the patient? If we are conducting a retrospective study, how do I inform the patient that the data or the electronic health record that is being maintained by the hospital, that data might be used later on for research purposes? Can the data be used equitably? Is it representative enough for the entire population so that the results or the insights can be generalized and adapted to a larger population? Can we ensure that this data will not be misused, will not be used for commercial purposes, will not be tampered for unintended consequences or tilted in favor of a particular sponsor? Has the transparency been ensured? And to answer all these questions, we have, and many more that you may have, we have two very experienced speakers with us. And to ensure that we get answers from all the sides, we have the speakers from both, one from the pharmaceutical industry and another from the healthcare side. So I would like, let me stop sharing. And I would like to introduce, first of all, Dr. Sanjay Kalra, Consultant Bharti Hospital. He's the past president of Endocrine Society of India, South Asian Federation of Endocrine Societies, and Indian Professional Association for Transgender Health. And he's currently Treasurer Education Working Group, ISE. He's also served on the Executive Council of the Research Society for the Study of Diabetes in India. And if you go on PubMed and search for his name, you will retrieve at least 1,000 search results. So that shows how well he is published. And then I would like to introduce Dr. Mayur Mabhate. He's a pharmaceutical physician with more than 12 years of overall experience, an expert in key levers of medical marketing and medical affairs. He has been associated with major pharmaceutical brands in the past, and currently he's heading the medical affairs at Alchem Laboratories. So, welcome to both of you. And before I thank you for taking out time to join me in this panel discussion.
Thank you, Pooja.
Thank you.
And I would start with Dr. Mayur. So, my very first question, and because I think patient privacy is the most important concern. So, my very first question is, how do we ensure patient privacy when we are collecting data from such heterogeneous sources?
Okay, well, the rightly said context by you in terms of various data sources that we are looking at for RWEs, right? In terms of electronic health records, insurance claims, hospital registries, lab data, and so on and so forth. Such a diverse set of data sources that we have for RWEs, and ensuring patient privacy is a cornerstone for, I think, in the entire helm of RWEs. So I think there are various strategies which are being used currently, and they're also in pipeline to ensure that we maintain the data privacy or the patient privacy while integrating that all the sources from of RWEs. So the first one, I think the most commonly used these days as a basic to secure data platforms is the encryptions, the high-end encryptions which we use even in our organization where we collect the data for our RWEs. We use end-to-end encryptions on that data platform. The data goes to the cloud storage, which is again secure, firewalled adequately, and the access to these, you can say, data is to for certain individuals only have the access. And in terms of you can say that minimizes the breach because selective people have the access to the data, and that's exactly we are talking about the blockchain technologies which are coming up in a big way, where certain people or the certain set of stakeholders will have access to that data, so that the breach is minimized, and the logs of the entry of those people getting into the access, the logs in, logs out, all will be controlled. So that is one of the major way by which we can kind of ensure the privacy. And once we see the data in terms of health records and others, uh, when we want to analyze that, the first thing we need to do is the data anonymization, or you can say pseudo anonymization for some data points. The masking, when I'm going to say, where the patient identifies like name, their email addresses, maybe some social security number or Facebook, whatever they are mentioned being there, they are being replaced by some unique codes as per the feasibility there, as patient 123 ABC or whatsoever. So this anonymization will definitely help to minimize the patient breach, data breach, and maintain that privacy as well. And these days there are a lot of kind of techniques which are available to ensure that we and the data is haven't kind of breach, where there is something called as differential privacy as well, where uh, when we want to collect the data for particular parameters from the electronic health record, for some of the parameters which we don't want to exclude, kind of expose in terms of patient privacy, these are being selectively kind of selected, where they call as noise being created, or the error being created while collecting the data, that shows that, say for example, we don't want to collect the email address, or maybe can say gender for the particular study, we want to have a open study there. So that gender column could be like marked as error or noise, that as they call as, so because of which the gender data is kind of masked, or the error will be thrown, while other data which can be computed and analyzed. So in this particular ways, in terms of, as I said, encryptions, firewalls, secure data storage, the blockchain access for selected people, the data anonymization. These are some of the ways by which we can, while integrating from the different sources, we can use that those technologies, those tools, to ensure that we maintain the patient privacy there.
All right. Thank you for that answer. Sanjay sir, but sometimes we also collect data for a real world study through case-based formats, case
Mm.
report formats. Now, when we are developing those and we are sharing those with, say, a participating physician, how do we ensure that there is no breach of privacy or no patient data is shared in that case? And what are your concerns when you are participating in these kind of studies?
So, informed consent is a must that has to be taken in any kind of study. In fact, the only kind of study where it is allowed not to take an informed consent would be a cluster RCT. For real world evidence or real world data collection, any kind of prospective study, you have to take consent. So your point is valid. Now, when you're taking consent, of course, the person who is doing the study, that is the investigator, is there, and the person who is consenting to participate, these two people are there. And now we are enjoined to have audio recording and video recording as well. So of course, from the audio you can listen to who is speaking, and from the video you can see who is consenting. All these will be kept separately, but when it comes to the data sheets that are kept, and the study file that is kept, there you will just pseudonymize. So for example, instead of saying that such and such participant, maybe Mayur agreed, we'll just say MM agreed or MM consented, and this was the process. So that is the way you pseudonymize. Now, the who are the people who can see the data? First of all, there is a person who is coming to check, who is coming to audit. This person is actually not allowed to see who the patient is. But if you want to do an audit and the audit is being done for a particular reason, then the Indian regulations actually say that you can do an audit periodically to see what is going on and what's happening. But otherwise, if you do this pseudonymization, the privacy part is taken care of. Of course, we would expect that each and every investigator uh, follows the highest level of confidentiality and integrity. So it was nice to see in your first slide. Of course, you mentioned privacy separately and confidentiality separately, but you have also mentioned integrity. So that is something that will come from within.
So, however, so you mentioned that ethics approval or informed consent is important for all kinds of studies. Now, when we are doing a retrospective study, everything has already been done. how do you go back to the patient? How do you inform them if they were not informed at the time of when the health record was being maintained?
Yeah.
How do you take consent in these cases?
So this is challenging. So a few aspects, and perhaps Dr. Mayur can pitch in also. The first thing is that when any kind of data is taken from a patient, at that time the person is a patient, is not a participant in a study, then there is an implied consent. But you might want to specify that this data will be used for your clinical care. Of course, we are using it for that, and also it might be used in future for research. So it would be a very broad umbrella kind of a consent that you take at the very beginning. Another thing can be a dynamic consent. So let us say I run a hospital, patients come to me. Somebody comes every 3 months, somebody comes every year. I take a dynamic consent. Every year I get them to sort of repeat that, yes, see, this is what we are going through, and your data might be used. So that's dynamic. Third can be electronic. So maybe not every EMR, but most EMRs you will have a contact, a telephone number, or an email ID. You can always send a message there. Now,
Okay.
all these three methods, they are not 100% foolproof. And then someone might come and say, my EMR is 30 years old. At that time, these concepts did not exist. So for that, the regulation and the safety of the patient, that has been taken care of by saying that even for retrospective analysis, you need to go to the ethics committee. The ethics committee will give you a waiver. So that is the key. Why will the ethics committee give a waiver? The ethics committee will give a waiver if they say, yes, we are very sure that the risk to privacy or breach of privacy is less than minimal, and the advantages, the benefits of this particular study are phenomenal, or they are much, much more than minimal. They are near maximal. So you do have to go to the ethics committee to get a waiver for that. And the ethics committee will be made of multiple different type of people. So everyone putting uh, their own perspective. And that is how we are able to safeguard the patient's privacy.
Right. So Dr. Mayur, when a pharmaceutical industry is conducting a retrospective study, do you take care of all these things? Do you always go to the ethics committee and take their approval and waiver on informed consent from the patients?
Exactly. I think Dr. Kalra has mentioned absolutely right. Even for the retrospective studies, we are just analyzing the health records of the patients. Ethics committee approval is must, and they will definitely ask you for have you taken the patient informed consent. However, then we can definitely say that it is such the anonymized data will be used for analysis. There will be no patient identifiers will be explicitly being mentioned. Then the waiver is definitely sought. So the answer to your question is yes. For all retrospective studies, we have to have ethics committee approval, and the respective waivers need to be sought from the ethics committee. And in terms of all the retrospective studies, even with like we are doing for any therapy area you want to say, uh, all the you can say de-identification as pseudonymization, as Dr. Kalra mentioned, they have to be kind of ensured. The data masking, which I've talked earlier, the pseudonymization, de-identification, all the possible kind of tools or the means by which we can hide the patient identity, the sensitive data, that we need to ensure.
Right. And this is applicable when we are going and we are collecting data from the patient health records. Now, if we are using data which has been collected through wearable devices, so
Hmm.
when we get access to that data, I don't think we will get any way to contact the person whose device it is and to inform them that their data is being used. Is it all right to use that data without informing them or without them letting know? Or do they follow a practice wherein the device user has been informed that the data might be used for clinical purposes?
Yeah, usually that is the case. There is a blanket consent, electronic consent that is taken by most manufacturers. But whether the participant or the person or individual actually reads that and understands that, that is really questionable. So again, this brings us to that aspect of integrity, apart from ethics and confidentiality and privacy.
True, there are like a number of things which we just say, I agree. We don't read it,
Yes.
the fine prints, right? So in that, it is being mentioned the data will be there somewhere in the cloud of their server. It could be the use for whatever purpose. So it is being there. However, we don't pay much attention to it. But we should.
It is these challenges, actually, these new challenges posed by technology, by modern technology. Technology
Hmm.
is a blessing, but then it comes with these challenges as well. A simple thing, uh, we go and scroll on Facebook or on YouTube or on, let us say, X, any of us, all of us who are logged in right now. And what
Hmm.
you find is after a couple of days, the kind of content that you logged in, whether advertently or inadvertently, that
Hmm.
same kind of content gets beamed
Popped
to
up.
you. So
Yeah.
yeah, it means someone is actually watching what you are doing and thinking about what you are doing and what you want, what you don't want, and that sometimes
Yes.
becomes a virtuous cycle because you get more of the same content, but it also might be
Yes.
a vicious cycle. Like for example, on X, Twitter, the experience that you have would be totally different from the experience that I have just because of
Hmm.
the first few clicks that I made.
Yes.
True, true. Is all
Yes.
this AI and
Absolutely.
ML is watching us all the time, sir.
Yeah. So maybe
Yes.
at a larger level, we cannot do much about what is going on at a larger level in that mega system. But when it comes to clinical research, then certainly we can do something, and that is that whenever you spearhead any kind of real world evidence, or you take part in it, you ensure that the ethics is taken care of. That is step one.
Hmm.
Everything else
Right.
may be negotiable, but not ethics. And the
True.
second thing is that if you get an opportunity, let us say you get an opportunity, suddenly you get lots of free data from somewhere, but
Yes.
ethics is not is kind of gray. Then just don't do it.
Right. So other than this privacy, what would be your other concerns when you are sharing your data, patient's data, for a study purpose?
When I share my data, I worry, of course, about privacy, confidentiality.
Hmm.
The main thing I worry is that in case my patient's contact number reaches somebody, then that person might be bombarded with advertisements, commercial advertisements,
Yes.
which may be welcome, which may be not welcome. That is my main worry. Actually, it's a very pragmatic and simple worry.
Yes. And a very important one at that. So when we are disclose, and it is absolutely fine that we should de-identify data, hide several information when we are sharing the data. Now, when we are sharing data for the purpose of research, it is very important to ensure that the accuracy of the data is maintained so that the utility loss is minimal. However, it is also important to ensure that there are no biases when we are sharing data by holding on to some amount of data so that the fairness loss is also minimal. Now, how do we ensure that? Because we cannot share everything. And when we are not sharing everything, are we giving rise to some sort of biases or prejudices in the data that we are sharing?
Exactly. I think Pooja, the one of the point that you that you brought about is about bias in collecting the data, and that brings us to our its impact on the ethical consideration of the RWA that we are doing. Now, in RWA, if we are kind of selection bias, we selected certain set of population which are like they don't represent the group, the entire the population that we are representing. So underrepresentation of certain population like minorities, like older age group people, pregnant women, patient with comorbid conditions, they are highly underrepresented kind of population. And if we take the RW data from there and say design some policies around that, it will be a injustice to those population where we want to say divert some funds to them, making policies around those kind of patient profiles. So I think in that regard, the it will lead to inequitable kind of healthcare spending from both from the healthcare industry, also from the pharma industry, also from the government side as well. So we have to be very careful in choosing the right population, right subsets of the population to adequately represent each and every corner of the society there. That's one perspective. Now, in second perspective, if we do that, what will it will happen is the trust of research the regulators will have in industry, the academic institutes, so that trust will again will minimize, right? And that vicious cycle will go on, that if the trust is again reduced, nobody will invest money into RWEs again, so that it will again start a vicious cycle. So I think in terms of ethical consideration, we need to be uniform as far as RWE goes. We need to represent each and every corner of the society so as to have an equitable distribution. And now these were some ethical aspects. Let's talk about some aspects from validation perspective. If we do the RWEs on the selected set of population, so the generalizability of that data is again questionable. We can't generalize that, and that again brings us to the larger impact data would have. It will be again kind of minuscule. So that the 2 points we need to definitely take into consideration, just to minimize the kind of bias, and the distribution should be equitable.
Sanjay sir, would you like to add to this?
Though the main advantage of real world evidence based on real world data is that the generalization is better. So when you do an RCT, randomized control trial, you have very strict inclusion criteria, even more strict exclusion criteria. So practically from my OPD perspective, let us say I was to say that I want to follow the results that have come from Leader study or Emperor or Soul. Their exclusion criteria are so tight and stringent. 95% of my OPD will be excluded. So it's not generalizable. I cannot translate. That is why real world evidence came in, because real world evidence is more broad, more accepting. The only inclusion exclusion criteria that you have, let us say you are speaking from a pharmaceutical intervention point of view, the only inclusion criteria are the indications for that product, and the exclusion criteria are the contraindications. It will be based upon the product inside, the prescribing information. So it is more broad, more open. But like Dr. Miyur said, in spite of that, sometimes we are not able to get full representation. Not only minorities, people who cannot speak or read or write English, they might get excluded. People who come from up country, let us say, for example, we have senior leaders here today logged in the webinar. Professor Saurabh Sharma is from New Delhi. Let us say he wants to do a real world evidence on post-transplant patients. He will find that he will have many participants from Delhi NCR, but very few from Uttarakhand, because they have to travel longer distances. So this is part and parcel of life, but we should try to sort of overcome that. And your question was about like partial disclosure or partial masking of data. Here it makes a difference. If I, for example, write that this person is from Uttarakhand, that is very transparency. But at the same time, if I don't write that, how do we know whether the data is finally going to be applicable to people from Uttarakhand or not? So this is that thin line of ethics and integrity that we have to walk. And I think there is an answer for this as well, Dr. There is an ethics committee. So we have to go for a waiver. And the ethics committee is made of more than one person. So different perspectives coming together, and then you are able to follow a pragmatic approach to this. And the ethics committee will not only look at potential risk to the privacy of the individual, it will also look at potential benefit to humankind, benefit from whatever the study is going to give us.
Right. And before I proceed with the questions that I have already prepared for the two of you, I have a question from Nikita, who has joined us, and she's asking, do we need patient consent or ethics approval even for a physician perception based survey? And this is my question also whenever I am doing a survey like this.
So to be honest, Nikita, that is a very tough question. Again, Dr. Miyur's comments welcome. But many, not one, but many journals now refuse to publish. They don't ask for consent, but they ask for waiver from ethics committee. So it's a good idea to go through the ethics committee, get a waiver. The waiver will specify why it has been given, because there is no risk to any individual, or less than minimal risk is the term that is used. And then you go ahead with whatever you are planning.
Right.
So from the pharma industry perspective, for the physician-based surveys, where we are just interviewing some physicians for their perception on, say, usage of antibiotics or usage of anticoagulants, antidiabetics, for which no EC approval that is this thing is there. But wherever the patients are there, the data is recruited from their respective patients, then it is good to have EC approval in place and conduct the waiver, go for the waiver there.
All right. So we have another question from Dr. Rahul. How do we ensure data accuracy in an independent practice setting where resources are limited? Which could be
Accuracy.
true for all small practices. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Rahul. Accuracy may not be a major issue because if the data is there, it should have come from somewhere. You can always check the primary source, and the
Hmm.
auditor can ask for the primary source, which usually will be available. It may not be typed, it may not be printed, it may be handwritten. But more
Hmm.
important than that is data completeness. So many times you will find in real world evidence, you have the age, you have the gender, but then you don't have the body weight or you don't have the BMI. So these issues are certainly there. Completeness of data is a big challenge.
True.
Right. And we have an interesting question from Dr. Shuchi. Do we have patient representatives in ethics committee panel? As far as I'm aware,
Yeah.
no, there are not, but are there?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
the
Okay.
the layman's are the layman is one of the key parameter or the key person in the EC. So there are 7 total people, including one which is a layman. So there is a patient or the common man's representative is always there in the EC.
Yes. And also a non-scientific person, spiritual or religious leader. So it is a good spectrum of society that is included.
Yes,
But thanks, Dr. Shuchi. This reminds us because we are working for the individual, finally the person, we should always keep the person at center.
exactly.
Patient centricity.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. So let me take the audience questions first, and then I go back to my questions. We have question from Ronak. Do we have central EC approval or concept or provision either for retrospective or prospective studies in India? Yes, we have. But
Yes.
if you would like to add something to it.
The answer is yes. We do have central EC approvals. The independent EC is that what we call as. So for our any RWEs retrospective just analysis of some records, it is good to have the EC approvals, the independent ones. We will get within 7 to 15 working days, and with the single, we can say their meetings, their queries, if they have, they can we can solve it immediately. We can get immediate approval for the our study.
Right.
So this
We
is
have a
like
yes.
so basically what Ronak was asking. This is correct what Dr. Muir said. If, however, you want to do a clinical trial, so today we are talking about real world evidence. If you want to do a
Yes.
clinical trial, then maybe you would need a local ethics committee. And even if your own hospital doesn't have one, the ethics committee should be within 70 kilometers of where you are working.
Yes, that is there. So now we also have e-ethics approval. Does how is there any challenge with that?
Pardon, haven't got your
So there
question.
are electronic ethics approval wherein you submit all the documents electronically. The EC meets also electronically. So there is no physical connect with the electronic committee. So do you see any challenges with that?
No, I think the post-COVID, it's a digital is the new normal now. So even for the not only the ECs but also for the regulatory studies, we do interact with the subject experts on a virtual basis itself. We present our data there at regulators on a virtual basis, and we get an approval, which is for regulatory studies I'm talking about. But even for the ECs, retrospective studies, EC submissions, everything is now virtual, and from the pharma industry perspective, I can see that we don't face any challenges. We do interact with them. They do give us the time for presentation. We do present our case, and if they have any questions, they give ample time to kind of revert.
Right. So we have a question from Astha. Who is masking the data when it is moved from a healthcare setup to a sponsor?
So that would depend upon the Astha, upon the EMR, or whether it is paper. So if it is a paper based, then that would be done by the hospital itself, whoever the clinical research associate is, that person will do it. And if it is electronic, then I guess it would be either of them, whoever is taking charge of
Yes.
the server, that person will do it. But but that point is well taken, and that should be written in black and white before you embark upon a study.
Who all have access to the data, who all can see the data. And which brings me to another question, though Dr. Mayur did touch upon it initially, but the number of viewers were, all of them were not there at that time. Are there any innovative methods to anonymize or de identify real world data while retaining its utility for research?
Yes, there are. I think in earlier question I asked about simple methods like de-identifiers, tokenization, pseudo-anonymization. There are possible. These days, we are having the newer methods of synthetic data, where the without actually taking the patient identifiers, we replicate the actual data into the synthetic sets, where statistician can play with the data in terms of making algorithms, bringing out stats of different perspective. So that synthetic data sets are getting kind of utilized these days in a big way, where patient privacy is not harmed. We can churn the data n number of times without breach and confidentiality as well. And the accessibility of data is to multiple sources can be given. Stakeholders, if the sponsor wants to see some data point, statistician, some CRO team, independent regulators, everybody can have access of data, and without patient identifiers. So that ensures the patient safety is being met.
All right. Sanjay sir, would you like to add to that?
No, that's right, and it is the first thing is patient safety. At the same time, we should have flexibility. Supposing we started off with a trial and our primary endpoint was A, and secondary endpoint or secondary objective was B. Suddenly, while looking at the data, while analyzing it, uh, other things crop up. It might be a safety issue, so you want to stop. You want to stop the study. It might be something interesting that comes out, and suddenly you want to see whether maybe there are confounders or contributors to a particular study. So these are things that can come up during a study as well. So we should have access to data. At the same time, it should be regulated. That is why if in between a trial, even real world evidence, suddenly we decide to change the endpoint or the goal, we say that we want to add an exploratory objective. You have to go back to the ethics committee for any change that you want in methodology, even if it is a change in wording in the English
Hmm.
language. Then you have to go back to go through to get it run through them. So flexibility should be there, of course, with the due oversight.
True, true. Any changes in protocol which is already submitted and approved by EC, we have to file an amendment. If the amendment EC feels if it is serious and need to be deliberated, they'll ask for a meeting. Else, the written communication will suffice for that.
Mhm.
All right. So FDA has published a framework for RWE's programs. So, are there any global regulatory differences in RWE usage, the data usage that we have here in India as compared to global regulatory processes that are there?
I think yes. I'll partly answer the question. Maybe Dr. Kalra can add. So globally, where in US they have act something called as HIPAA Act, where the it is more for healthcare records or healthcare system. Patient Data Privacy Act is there from US perspective. From UK they have something called as GDPR, which is more general in terms of their usage for those patients, their own, not only general, you can say the health act, health records, but the personal other records, they have that act. In India we have you can say earlier it was Data Privacy Act, which was now revised to GP, Digital Privacy Act 2023. which is now we are talking about something called as Disha now. Disha, it's not yet reinforced, but very soon that bill will be tabled into our parliament, where it also will be approved, which will be more stringent in terms of how the digital health records of the Indian patients will be handled. What are the different kind of breaches that are possible? What are the different penalties that are there for the stakeholders that are being kind of tabulated? But as of now, we are concerned. We do currently have the Data Privacy Act for us.
All right. So, would you like to add?
The approach and the thought process, that is the same across the world, but you do see differences, and I can explain in two ways. First of all, this is such a dynamic field. uh, there was a sudden interest in the concept of patient privacy, patient rights, patient data after World War II. That was after Nuremberg, and then things kept on increasing, evolving with time. But then there was a sudden increase around COVID time as well. So it's so dynamic. That's one.
Right.
Second is the way we communicate. Now, the way we communicated 50 years ago was different from the way we communicated 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But the kind of revolution which the printing press brought 500 years ago, that kind of revolution we are seeing now. Even our e-communication is changing day by day. So there's a greater need for this. So this is one reason that changes are occurring very fast. So we might, let us say the Indian regulators might bring out a document in January 2024, which is standard of art, standard of science, standard of care. But by June, everything has changed. And the Europeans had planned to bring out their document in July. So theirs looks updated. So overall, the approach is same. When it comes to definitions, perhaps as of now, the FDA has done a better job of defining things for us. But even then,
Yes.
when you look at the definition of RWE, that can also be improved. If we were to do a brainstorming with Dr. Mayur and his team, we would come out with many, many different definitions without using AI, and all those definitions would be better. So that's one. Uh, the definition part is better from the US. As far as the privacy is concerned and what privacy means, I think the best document comes from Europe.
Hmm.
But there is scope for improvement, and I think that means work as well for everyone who has logged in. So all industry leaders and medical profession leaders, uh, Prabhu has asked a very good, very tough question. So has Abhanand. But work for everyone is to get together and create that document, a live document. We should reach out and help the regulators by
Yes.
giving them pragmatic definitions, which they can incorporate.
Yes. And then while you were talking about him, considering the poor EHR records, how to ensure completeness of data. This is something we all struggle with when we are trying to do a real world data analysis. So, how would you like to respond to that?
In medicine, we have got this concept of primordial prevention, primary prevention, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. So let's look at it that way. Primordial prevention means each and everyone in the world in healthcare profession gets taught about the need to document and need to document properly and completely. Primary prevention here would mean those people who have a chance of taking part in real world data generation. They are focused upon. And secondary would mean people who have already signed in. So let us say I sign in, Dr. Mayur runs an all India study or Pan Asia study, and I sign in that I will be an investigator. Uh, there should be more focus on me for the importance of complete data collection. So it
Right.
boils down to education and awareness. And because the resources are limited, you cannot reach out to the 10 lakh Indian healthcare providers at any one point of time, but at least you focus on people who have taken part in your study.
Right. Dr. Mayur, would you like to add to that?
No, I think in terms of if the data is missing, there is data is incomplete. We hardly can go back to the patient again and fill that data, right? So better to exclude that data if you want to get an crisp or uniformity of data. As far as try to be uniform, if the parameter is like non-confounding with your objective, then you can include that data set, that cohort into the study. But if it is very critical, the parameter or the endpoint which is affecting your study, I think better to exclude that particular patient from the analysis.
Right. And Abha is asking, RWD comes from multiple fragmented sources such as EHRs, claims, wearable devices. Now, how do we ensure integrating this data into a cohesive, usable form?
That's a bigger challenge. That's a very bigger challenge in terms of the heterogeneity of the data. Now, I would answer in a different way rather here, because if let us define the objective here. Say for example, if you want to take care of or understand the drug utilization pattern or uptake of certain molecule or certain therapy over the other, then let us use the insurance data, insurance claim data, utilization data first. So that can be more highly weighted compared to a health record, which is being used in a different setting. But however, if you want to test the efficacy, effectiveness, and the safety of particular molecule A versus B, then better utilize the hospital records rather than the claims. So again, that depends on the objective in which what exactly we're looking at. Choose the data point wisely to get the right answers.
So the point is, this is the biggest problem that we face actually in the country. Otherwise, you see a small country like Taiwan, such beautiful research comes out of there because they have got a unified health data system. The data is taken, it's entered properly, it's stored properly, it's analyzed properly, and they make sure that privacy is taken care of. And we are such a huge country, but because we are fragmented, we are unable to give good quality data to the rest of the world. But then, like Dr. Muir said, it depends upon what you want, what kind of study you're looking at, what kind of data, what kind of inference you are searching for. And based upon that, you can find the right people. It is also about creating an ecosystem. So when we speak about ethics and privacy, that is our topic for today, and the denominator is real world evidence. It is not a cross-sectional thought process that let me do it today and I don't have to do anything tomorrow or yesterday. It is longitudinal. The ecosystem has to develop. Our webinar today is one tiny step towards that development. So, and everyone who is logged in together, that is strength. We are actually trying to change and improve the ecosystem. So we find centers where the data is of good quality and we take them. There should be financial incentive for giving good data, and also there should be a disincentive. So supposing I contracted a principal investigator from XYZ state, but when the data comes to me, there is so much of missing data or so much of implausible data. Maybe I was looking at waist circumference and somebody has got a waist circumference of 1,000 centimeters, which is just not possible. There should be a disincentive there as well. That not only will you be not paid for entering the data, there will be X amount of money that will be docked. Like in our exams, in our medical exams, you get minus marking, negative marking. So if we can introduce this incentive for positive or for correct data entry and disincentive for wrong or incomplete data entry, then I think the ecosystem will improve. And that, Dr. Mayur, would be a good idea. We have Dr. Shuchi and so many other people from the industry with us. So if you don't enter the data, that's zero finance. And if you enter wrong data, that's a negative marking. So that also might be something that the industry can consider.
That's a great idea. So I think one of the point you brought about uniform, you can say, entry of the records. Say for example, Apollo might not have the same entry parameters as Medanta or maybe Fortis or even other hospital chains. So I think at the first outset, we have to create a digital ecosystem or the uniformity across the country, which is talked by our Honorable Prime Minister Modi as well, that during Ayushman Bharat digitalization, one of the first thing that he would be kind of looking to do is uniform the health record system, where the data is being collected at maybe similar parameters are being evaluated. The formats should be standardized, validated. This is the first step towards going to the secure or homogeneous data that we're talking about.
Right. We also have a question from Shilpi. She's asking, in context to the reliance on digital records for RWE, What measures are taken to ensure their security, and how are the potential vulnerabilities addressed that might compromise patient privacy? I think we have addressed
Great.
this question throughout our discussion, so she would have already got her answer. And there was one more question from Shivani. How can we ensure that the data and discussions conducted during online telemedicine and remote monitoring remain secure and are not disclosed to anyone?
So the question that both of them asked is actually it is more relevant for the entire digital ecosystem. So,
Hmm.
supposing there is a particular hospital, we have digital records,
Hmm.
whether they are related to a patient who is coming to us physically or who is teleconsulting. You have to now. It's not just about keeping good quality data, storing good quality data. It's about protecting your data from external hackers or external people with malicious intent. And you see this kind of thing happening even in our premium hospitals every now and then. And
Hmm.
you see it happening in premium hospital chains in the West as well. So this means that white hat hacking or you know uh, digital protection, these kind of measures have to be done. And again, it's part of the ecosystem. The same way we look at our country's borders and we want to protect them, similarly, we have to look at our digital data and protect it.
Right.
True.
We have another question from Farah. How to manage conflicts of interest to manage transparency in RWE?
How do we?
How to manage conflicts of interest to manage transparency in RWE? I may also have a question which could be aligned to it. How do we ensure that the RWD data and the insights that we take from it are not misused or used for commercial purposes? How do we avoid commercialization of real world data and insights?
So Farah has a point. Again, I'm just looking at the context and what is going on through her mind. But you're right, there may be conflict of interest. Uh, then it is up to the sponsor. So there is this quadruple. From Ayurveda, we have this quadruple called Atreya's quadruple. If you want optimal clinical outcomes, the doctor has to be optimal, the patient has to be optimal, the drug also has to be optimal, and so has to be the caregiver or the family or friend. So all four have to be good. Only then you will be able to achieve optimal outcomes. Similarly, in a clinical trial or in a real world evidence, the sponsor has to be optimal, whoever is sponsoring that real world evidence. The investigator has to be optimal, right? The participant, now it's not a patient anymore, the participant should be optimal. If the participant tells me a lie, I will enter that lie. Does the patient have HIV or not? What is the patient's sexual orientation? Supposing that is the topic of discussion or debate or research, we are limited by what the patient told us, by what the participant told us. And the fourth then would be technology or the people who are part of the study. So let us repeat again the sponsor. So we'll ask Dr. Mayur what an ideal sponsor should be like. Then second is the physician or the investigator. That person should know what GCP means, good clinical practice means, and he or she should follow GCP. Third is two things. One is technology, and second is manpower, woman power, the people who are doing the study. They should also be optimal. And the fourth, of course, is the participant. So perhaps Dr. Muir can take this quadruple and create something nice out of it. And one by one, if we can define what optimal means for all four. The physician, that is the easiest. You just do GCP and then you follow GCP.
No, that's a wonderful thought, Dr. Kala. I think uh, let's maybe worth giving a nice thought. But coming to the question which she asked about commercial usage of RWE, so from the sponsor perspective, I think the that depends on the objective of that RWE. For example, if you want to study the effectiveness of X drug versus Y, for which we have done a prospective RWE, so and the sponsor has kind of invested into it. After result comes, we come to know that the drugs X is better than drug Y in terms of effectiveness and safety, obviously those results will be commercialized, right? We could promote that particular information across the country to multiple physicians, just to enhance the kind of knowledge about X drug compared to Y. So in terms of commercialization, I think this stems from the objective of the RWA that we're talking about. If it is there from the particular objective of generating evidence for the particular therapy, particular molecule, particular kind of comparing the X versus Y, I think it will be commercialized. I think no harm in that.
So, if the results are not in favor, will the sponsor still go ahead and publish the results of that RWE?
That depends. Ideally, it should be there as a ethical practice. GCP, we have to publish whatever is the outcome, irrespective of whether positive
Yes.
or negative. It's a liability on the sponsor level where they need to do that. So, in my opinion, absolutely, the answer is yes.
All right. We have another question from Shalini. In India, are all RWE studies registered at CTRI? The percentage of publications of RWEs compared to controlled clinical trials seems less. What best practices can be followed to improve the transparency of RWE study results?
No, I think Shalini, that's a great observation, uh, and that stems from the I think lack of awareness of CTRI from the research perspective could be one, because people know clinicaltrial.gov, people in US register both RWEs and RCTs equally well. However, the representation of RWEs in our country is very less. People might feel it's very minuscule. There is no patient being involved. Nothing is being harmed at the patient. It's just a survey kind of thing, study. So the mindset of the researchers, clinicians, sponsors, everybody, I feel they are responsible. But ideally, all the RWEs that which we are doing, they need to be registered at CTRI, so that we create a wealth of data for us or for others to refer for the future. I completely agree with your point. So, and to improve that, I think awareness is the only method that we can kind of ensure. Awareness at the sponsor level, awareness at the clinicians level, awareness at the academicians level, all can be need to be improved.
And Dr. Mayur, this is really nice idea for research. We can go to CRI, which is in CTRI, which is in public domain, and see actually what is the number. Like you do a bibliometric analysis, we can do an analysis of studies that are registered in India, and then maybe we can compare with the publication output. So what kind of I mean that will also have lots of insights. It will help the regulators, it will also help the industry and in general it will help everyone understand where the focus is and how
Hmm.
we can improve ourselves
True, true. The current stats, if I talk about, is less than 10%
of publication.
of total RWs which are kind of ethics approved, doesn't go to CTRI. Less
Yeah,
than 10.
and it should ideally be 100 years.
Right, we've almost reached the end of our time, and Dr. Rahul has one more question. And once we enter this domain, it's the conversations don't stop. But I'll still take this question from Dr. Rahul. Is there any known AI bot that may ease the data entry for RWE, like Hey Google or Siri function, while typing in a chat or note?
Okay. As a sponsor, I know a couple of kind of CROs who use AI for data entry and even for data analysis later. I am not recollecting the names, but there are many. There are many AI-based platforms which are being used right now by recent all our CROs to enter data, and within like minutes, if we ask them to give analysis, they can give us. So the answer is yes.
So if we are using an AI bot to enter this data, how can we ensure the data confidentiality now? Are
I'm
the
talking about
safeguards in
no,
place?
I'm talking about the AI based tools to analyze, and AI
Okay.
based platforms to kind of enter and analyze the data.
Okay.
Mm. That speeds up things actually. And Dr. Shuchi has asked an interesting question, and it is nice to see industry leaders from across the country joining today. So, Dr. Shuchi asks, Dr. Mayur, wouldn't it be ethical to present everything in plain language? So, the consent forms that are made, are they in plain language, in vernacular? What is it? How do you get a consent form made?
Uh, so ideally, when we give the consent form for even regulatory studies, it is there in their regional language. Apart from Hindi and English, it is always presented in the regional language, read to them, and then basis the patient's willingness, they either opt in or opt out for the study, basis their own intellectual domains. So it is always there in the regional language, no doubt about that. In India, we have 26 languages into which the EC accepts the consent form, uh, which all the major languages in India are covered.
So she's also talking about the results, not just the consent forms.
The results, okay. So plain language summary is there, Dr. Shuchi, for many of the journals, but for some of the journals, I guess. So this is also good food for thought.
Oh, she's asking about results of the study. Oh
Yes,
my God.
yes.
No, currently I think majority of us
Yeah.
published in English. So
No, but it is not mandated, but some journals from Springer, for example, you have
mm,
to write a PLS, a plain language summary. So
Yes.
let us say my article is 4,000 words. I have to write
mm,
150 words as plain language summary. Dr. Pooja has written many of them.
yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. So we've almost now crossed the time limit. So I would request both of you to give your takeaway points before we end this extremely interactive and interesting session. So we'll start with Sanjay sir.
Yeah.
So our topic for today was real world evidence. Now, real world evidence is going to be like the real world, which can be quite stormy, which can be quite challenging. But if you look at it, it's fun also. It's exciting. It's vibrant. That is what the real world is. In this, we wanted to talk about ethics and privacy. So we've learned that ethics and privacy are not binary kind of constructs. If they were, if ethics was just black and white, then you would not need to have a webinar for 1 hour. And then even after that, you say, yeah, we don't know the answers to many things. Let's study more. Let's learn more. So ethics and privacy will change with time. They will evolve. They will improve. But the thought process behind all this is the same. That means that we want the best possible for our fellow citizens. We want the best possible for our patients. That's what we want to address today. We see that there are safeguards across the world made by different regulatory authorities. But even those regulatory authorities are at different levels in their journey or different phases in their journey of understanding the definitions, understanding the processes, or even the challenges posed to privacy or to ethics. So we need to keep on learning. We need to keep on going on that journey. And it's been pleasant being with Dr. Mayur and Pujaji today. Even more pleasant being with so many people who have logged in. The exact count, perhaps Pooja can tell us.
I can see 33 people right at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, so my takeaway from this particular webinar is about how we can navigate through current ethical and privacy challenges. We all know they are there. That is, elephant in the room is always there. But we, as a team, like sponsor, regulators, clinicians, we have to ensure that the data that we're collecting is, say, equitable. Then there are robust consent mechanisms that we are talking about. The data security should be kind of trustworthy. Patients should be taken into confidence while consenting that particular data is being used for research purposes. At the end of the day, we are talking about patient centricity here, where the approach, maybe the transparency, the regulatory environment, we need to make an ecosystem where the striking a balance is critical. As the seminar title itself, balancing trust and innovation. We are innovating at one hand, but the trust of the patients is also being equally important, for which collectively we have to work to create an ecosystem.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking out time from your busy schedules. Dr. Mayur, already, I believe you'll have to go back to your meeting again. Uh, my takeaway is that I think we should be coming out with a framework which can be used in India, and we can always adapt from best practices that are being practiced across the globe. And adapting from those, we should definitely come out with a framework for how to conduct RWEs, so that all those people who are doing RWE studies have a very clear cut pathway to conduct those studies without touching upon any ethical or privacy or confidentiality roadblocks. So, once again, thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of the webinar today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And
Goodbye.
Thank you. Good evening and good night to everybody. Thank you.
good
Goodbye.
evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining in.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, sir. Absolutely privileged to share the meeting with you, sir.
That is mutual.
Yeah.
Thanks to Pooja and
Thank
Mayur.
you.
Bye.
We'll meet somewhere in next conference, sir.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thanks,
Bye.
Pooja, for
Thank you.
inviting. Pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.